So here we are. This is turn 3, the May-August of 42 for Empire of the Sun. Went through the initial reinforcements phase, reinforcements, replacements, strategic war, and the cards. Placing the reinforcements is just such a hard decision for me. I probably did some very foolhardy things. For example, putting the Southwest Pacific headquarters here at Guadalcanal with a lot of force. I've got these worries, big worries, that I put enough in Hawaii, which is almost nothing. Reinforcements that are replacement points that I think I forgot last time for the airplanes, but it didn't really matter, and some Marines. I put them in place late last turn, probably without saying anything. I also put, and this seemed almost useless, the South Pacific headquarters. It's only got a range of 7 and an efficiency of, or effectiveness or whatever, of 1, which means I'm looking at it as a fallback position. If I lose Guadalcanal, I'll at least have something that can command those forces, keep them in supply, and prevent the U.S. from failing completely by my boldness. This is MacArthur. Of course he's going to be bold, right? I don't know enough of the history to know if this is even what happened. And that's kind of a shame. It really is. I suppose the game doesn't come with a good outline of the history. Probably there is one over in Pacific War. I haven't gotten to that rule book yet. I'm still clipping it. And I have no idea when I'm going to get to play that thing. It's something I've wanted for so long, but it's definitely a biggie. Okay, for the Japanese, I felt like I had an easier time. They were... I placed an extra carrier, I don't remember quite where, up here. No, that's just a heavy cruiser. I don't know why that's there, actually. Because it sent me there originally. I don't know quite. Yeah, I don't know where I stuck the new carrier. It may be that. Yeah, that's it. The Junyo is the new one. I put it over in Camran. Perhaps not a wise idea because there's not a lot of naval power over here. The Brits decided to throw their forces, and this is again kind of weird, I think, into Australia. They put the Anzac Command here because they have the ABDA here. They're looking at just trying to get more coverage. This is kind of risky, though. There's no air cover for that. I'm going to have to move this plane over. The Japanese could strike first. Looks pretty unlikely. I'm not sure. That's a high risk to knock out a headquarters is what it comes down to. But it may be well worth it. I'm a little confused, concerned. These units should have been out of supply by my bookkeeping, understanding, whatever. And I may have to relook at the supply rules, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that this section would be out of supply, given that they're in their kind of natural location and nothing's interfered with them. I have to look at that and try to figure out whether or not I screwed up there. I also took a Chinese division out, or something. I don't know what that... I don't think that represents divisions, given the size of these other units. And I took that for a replacement point. And again, I can't tell you where I put it. Maybe up here? Not entirely certain again. I've got plans to move after the Dutch, of course. China looks like a remote possibility until I close the Burma Road, and Burma looks less important, and hence China, than taking the Dutch East Indies out. So I'm aiming more towards that. But I'm also seeing that the Allies are aiming more towards defending this area, trying to keep a foothold in here, which historically they had much more difficulty doing. This is important because that controls the mandate, the Australian mandate, and I would really rather not. It's not really worth any points, I don't think, but I'd rather not lose it just because the Japanese are able to get the Guadalcanal Island. Okay, so then we went to strategic warfare, and the U.S. got lucky. And that means there's one less naval transport for Japan, and they only get 6 cards this turn. Good thing they put one in the reserve. The U.S. gets 6 cards this turn automatically as well. I mark passes with these little flags so that I have something to throw in. It may be what these things are for, I don't know. I know these are specified as being used on this track for keeping track of numbers for the battles, and these seem similar, although not closely aligned. It's just kind of weird. Oh, and then of course I have this proof of purchase, which I'm not sure what to do with either. But that could be useful too. Alright, so I'm going to move on into the operations phase, and we'll start seeing, just how out of it I am in terms of my decision-making abilities. Well, some cool stuff is happening, so I wanted to pause my action here. Operation Ryu has started, and not really in New Guinea, but instead I managed to make attacks in Sumatra and take all the Dutch out of there, move into position on Borneo. They still don't have Bangka, but it's looking like the Dutch position is being undermined heavily. But there's a lot of force associated there, as well as a decent amount over here, and maybe some kind of unused force back here. I'm afraid to leave Japan undefended, but I don't know how heavily I have to defend it. It's a long ways. You gotta make some islands first. I should be able to react. What did that leave? That left an opportunity. And the English got the Allies got an interesting card for the English, activating the Southeast Asia Command. It's got a logistics value of 4. It's a surprise attack, not a guaranteed one, but with a decent number. And can't see it now, but at the time, the forces here in Southeast Asia, the Japanese had no air cover. They were almost helpless. Oops, big mistake? Maybe not. The card they had buried under the future offensives was this Japanese counterattack at Savo Island. It allows them to only move air and naval units, but that's sufficient. Logistics value of 3 let them move 4. They pulled an air unit up from Borneo into French Indochina, so now they have air cover, and they also threw 2 battleships and a heavy cruiser into the battle, which changes the nature of it greatly. I'm going to actually do this in real time. I don't do this with most, but since I'm chattering anyway. So let's see what we got. Well, the Allies gave themselves 23 strength points of planes, which I'll register that way. And the Japanese have quite a big force here at 22, 34, 44 points. I'll mark that like this. Where you weren't looking because I had let the camera drift. Okay, what about the results? Well, it's not a surprise attack, and it's an interception, so we roll at the same time. And the Allies got a good roll, comparatively. But we're going to do a quarter of 44. That's going to be 11 hits for Japan, that Japan's going to deal out. And I'll just mark that. And half, which is going to be 12 hits that the Allies get to deal. Okay, so let's look. 12 hits that the Allies get to deal. I could smack the Mogami, or I could hit a plane. I think air power is more important. I'm going to hit the plane. Let me see what happens if I hit the Mogami. Yeah, it's not even reduced by as much. So I'll hit the Japanese plane with that. And that's all they can hit because the numbers of everything else are too big. And then the Allies, the Japanese did 11. This is only against air units. Well, it looks like the SEAC plane is the biggest thing I can hit, but that can be recovered. I'll still hit it. I think hitting those older things, I'd like to do it eventually, but right now I want to reduce their strength as much as possible. Nobody's got air cover, and we're looking at 24 and 20 for the two values. Now this is in jungle, so that's only a -1. And nothing else is in effect here. So the attacker rolled very poorly with a 1. They're only doing half damage, which is going to be 12 points. That's sufficient to hit the Japanese. The Japanese, on the other hand, do 1.5 points times, which is 30. That's only enough to hit one Allied force. The Japanese hold the hex. They took equal losses. And now I take care of the post-battle movement, where I think I'll fly this back here. Actually, these go first. I never know where to put things. I'll put them back with the Junyo where they came from. And I'll leave this air unit here because I don't have a backup card, and I really want the zone of influence from the air unit. Actually, I may move it up a hex. Just that gives me influence all the way to there. Not that that's terribly useful. All right, and on to a Japanese turn. Okay, a couple more actions. The U.S. What did they launch? Damn, I can't remember. Fired that off. That event. Ah, yeah. Okay, so they fired this event off using the Brits again and pushed a little further into sight, and not the event. Actually, yeah, it is the event. Pushing a little further into Siam. The Japanese are obviously a little weak there. The Japanese used this operation with its logistic value. They're only allowed to move one ground unit, so they slid this guy into Sorbaja, taking another resource hex. But at the same time, they did a massive naval and air combined attack. This is dead too. Let me think about that. Is that dead? 50, 68. No, it's not quite. This is still alive. Okay, they did a massive naval and air combined attack and got a critical hit. And with that, they were able to actually sink a couple of key ships that they wouldn't have otherwise. They were able to take the Warspite down. They were able to take the Indomitable, which was at a distance, but they had one air unit that could hit. So they were actually able to knock out a British carrier. I'm going to slide these back, and the Japanese have to find their way home too. But that was a major advantage for them. Got room for him here. You can only stack 4 ships in a space. The ships seem to be an abstraction. There's more than one ship in each counter, I would suggest. I'm not positive. I don't remember that being noted in the notes, but it's kind of weird because they're named. But clearly there were more capital ships involved. If you look at something like Dice in the Pacific, the number of ships in this seems much, much less, which is fine. Anyway, Java has become a much weaker holding for the Dutch. Only one more hex has to go, and then the Dutch will surrender in the East Indies entirely. But we're seeing progress being made everywhere else by the Allies. The U.S. Having taken Rabaul over here back, and with the Brits marching into Indochina area, or towards it. Definitely a different flavor to the game. One of the problems, and one of the reasons you see so many offensives, I think, by the Allies, is I got these cards. I'm not sure that this is good or bad, because I may be taking casualties that I need to keep alive, but the Allies get replacements, the Japanese don't. So taking damage on some of those better units, maybe not so much, not these Indians that have a yellow dot, for example, but taking damage on units that I can rebuild doesn't seem like a terrible idea, because I will win the war of attrition. If there's no war at all, if Japan's allowed to just sit, they will win. Alright, well, we'll keep going. Okay, some more weird stuff happened here. So, the Japanese continued and took Java, and they have just knocked the Dutch out of the game as best as I can tell. They now own all this stuff, so I'm not going to leave flags all over the place. That'll just make life harder on me. They also went and grabbed New Guinea. Now, this was actually a couple of actions to do all this. They had to move up through Java and then actually attack on a second action. And in that first action, I believe they grabbed whatever this resource is. They're up to 13 of their 14 resources. I don't believe they give 7 cards. I don't think it's rounded up, but I can check that and will. The British launched another attack, and this one didn't go well at all. All that happened was they lost an air unit that they can rebuild, but they've got some serious losses built up here. And the U.S., yeah, let's not get to them yet. The Japanese played the War in Europe card, which moved the war down here, which is making Allied reinforcements less likely. The U.S. buried a card. The Japanese did not, but the U.S. played Operation Galvanic and launched an attack on Wake Island and took it. Now that, at first I thought, cool. So one of the problems I have here, and this is me, not the game, is this, I must do something. What do I do? What do I do? And I see the British launching attacks over here, and I see the Americans doing this, and I really question this, because they couldn't get their planes there. The best they could do is land them over on Midway. Of course, they're going to get reinforcement planes over on Hawaii, which is part of the reason they were doing this, is they're getting too many planes. But now they've got this kind of exposed Marine unit out here, which, if the Japanese want, they can just wipe it out. Now, of course, it can be rebuilt, and there's an expense and a seesaw, but the Japanese really do not want Wake Island to become an American incursion there. That's another problem they have to face if that's there, in addition to whatever's going on down here and what we see up here. So they probably will try to knock that out, for good or ill. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Let me make sure I did all the cleanup stuff. And National Will, I forgot about the points for that. The U.S. Dutch East Indies went, which means U.S. National Will goes down 1. And I don't think anything else does. I don't think strategic bombing affect, or strategic submarines affect that. It's the bombing. There's a lot of little things there that I don't have a clear understanding of the point of it. So, for example, U.S. strategic bombing reduces Japanese card draw by 1 or more cards. Okay, it hasn't done that. Shift 1 to the right. If Japanese control 3 or less resources on any game turn. These are all little things, and this is one of the problems that I have with a lot of the CDGs in particular, is they are chock full of these rules. Now this one seems to be almost entirely these kind of rules. Yes, there's certainly a mechanism here, and it's explained. But this is what makes the rules to these games so tough for me. Is there's not a lot of mechanics going on. It's all big decisions, and then many of which are based on single little rules here and there. Now, same thing happens with the other big strategic games. There's no question there. If I'm playing Advanced Third Reich, there's a lot of little rules having to do with every single country, but there's a lot of mechanical aspects in between there. Every decision doesn't depend on me finding the set of rules and making some big strategic choice there. Something like this, I feel like I have to make those strategic thoughts way too often, pretty much once per card, to tell you the truth. I may have some general over plans, but then, as things develop, I have to start recalculating the whole strategy on each card play, and that's tough for me. It really is. I know some people like to maximize the amount of decision making and minimize the amount of mechanical stuff. I end up taking just as long to play because these kind of decisions give me a headache, and I have to walk away from the game and spend a couple hours, doing God knows what on the computer before I can come back and face another decision. Whereas when I've got a lot of mechanical stuff to do, I can be fiddling, and then I take a short break, come back, read the one rule or whatever I need. But if I have to read one rule for every single action, that's rough on me. Clearly, if you've played it a few times, you'll be up to date on the things you need, though. I just don't happen to play games all that much. Anyhow, my gut tells me this is a bad choice. That's our risk that the U.S. shouldn't have made. Up this one goes, and we'll see how this war continues. This moves forward, and we're in September, December.